Jen Faulkner, our director of marketing, who I've known for 20 years, taught me a lot about branding and has always said branding is the promise of an experience. I'm Kyle Racki, CEO of Proposify, and I've been running a business for the past 15 plus years since I was 24, and Proposify for the last 10 years. And so what I like to do is just share some of the lessons that I learned across product, marketing, sales, everything that I've learned running a business. Jen Faulkner, our director of marketing, who I've known for 20 years, taught me a lot about branding and has always said branding is the promise of an experience. I don't know where she got that from, if she made it up, if she thought of it, but that is something that she's always said. And it's funny because a lot of people, when they think about branding, they typically think about design materials. They always think about websites and logos and that kind of thing. If you think of it as like branding is the promise of an experience. So what does that actually mean? So somebody once reached out to me over LinkedIn and was like, "Hey Kyle, I signed up for a demo on your website. Nobody's gotten back to me." And it kind of killed me to hear that because, it ended up being like this routing issue with email. Like nobody was intentionally ignoring them. But when you think about just how does that look to the other person when they reach out and they're like, "I want to buy your stuff," and nobody gets back to them, it makes your company look amateurish. And like they don't have their stuff together. That is the kind of stuff that really ultimately is going to make or break your brand at the end of the day, right? Like nobody's going to remember what the website looked like or anything like that. They're going to remember what kind of experience did I have. And so if branding is the promise of an experience, then it's about how you fulfill on that promise. All your marketing materials can say like, "Hey, you're going to have this, we're going to solve XYZ problems for you," but if you don't come through on the other end, then it's ultimately going to hurt your brand. And so I want to give a couple examples of, both good and bad that I've seen from other companies. So it makes me think about this, like I've been going to the same massage clinic for 20 years here where I live. And I had such a negative experience just one time, and I've actually never gone back there. So, I've never missed an appointment. I've never been late for an appointment, but there was a calendar mishap. It wasn't on my calendar, so I didn't show up. I get a call and they say, "Oh, you had a massage," and I go, "Oh wow, it wasn't in my calendar, can I reschedule?" And I got a text back that was like, "Okay, but when you come back, you're gonna have to pay for the missed session." And it was like, I've been going to you for 20 years and never missed anything, and now you're gonna charge me for this missed appointment, right? So that's an example of like a customer interaction that they could have built a system around, or they could have looked at my record and been like, "Oh man, he comes here all the time. Don't charge him. Clearly a mistake." But that's just an example of how if your business is set up with this list of rules or these standard policies, they can really sometimes hurt your brand more than anything, right? Somebody put this policy in place to try to discourage people from missing appointments, but really what it ended up doing was, destroying a customer relationship. One thing that's really interesting is how, as marketers, we often think about all of the touch points that people have with us before they buy, right? It's about how you appear on social media or what your website looks like. But I think of like a restaurant. So nobody really remembers seeing an ad for a restaurant, or they don't really necessarily remember before they went. But most of the actual brand interaction that happens is your experience of going. And you think of all the multiple touch points that get involved, from when you book the reservation to when you show up, how you're greeted by the host, what the atmosphere is like, how quickly do they bring you water and ask for a drink order, right? So there's probably literally hundreds of touch points involved when you go and eat out. And all it takes is one of those experiences to be negative to, suddenly bring up like, "Man, I don't know if I want to come back here again." Right? And think about your business. If you're in B2B, it isn't just, again, the website. It's like, did the sales rep show up to the call on time? Were they professional? Did they remember, when they handed you off, did they forget about the problems and all the stuff that you talked about on the first call, right? So there's all these hundreds of micro interactions that can happen. And I think we need to be paying as much attention to those from a branding perspective as all the other stuff, right? And monitoring that, because again, ultimately that's going to be the experience that people have with your brand. Example of this overused brand when it comes to talking about brand, but I'll say it anyway, is like Apple cares about the packaging. They care about every touch point. They think about the experience of unboxing one of their products. And there's nothing about that is not intentional and not thought out. And that stuff was happening as far back as when Jobs was leading Apple, because he cared about that stuff. And we know that Jobs was a great marketer. Jobs had his fingerprint on all their advertising, all their messaging. That was as important to him as the product itself. And so if we're thinking about our business through that lens, that means that if you're running a business, not just sort of relegating the marketing and the product to somebody else, but really being involved in and considerate and intentional about everything that you do. And sometimes customers are wrong, right? But it doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, a customer can be wrong but still buy your stuff. And ultimately, unless they're somebody who you don't want their business anymore, you should try to keep them around, which means agreeing with them when they're wrong, seeing what you can do. I mean, I had this experience happen just the other day, quite honestly, where one of our customers had a negative experience. They wanted to talk to me. I jumped on a call with them. I actually showed them that there was a misunderstanding in terms of what a certain feature did that actually would solve their problem, but they wanted to switch out their customer success manager. And I don't even think it was necessarily that person's fault, but that was their perception, right? Their perception was they didn't communicate with them, even though they did. So, and I've had that stuff happen to me as well, right? Where, maybe this customer doesn't want to deal with me. They want to deal with someone else. But ultimately, like, as they say, the customer's always right. Sometimes you just have to choose, like, what hill do you want to die on? So you always hear about Bezos calling the customer support line on a regular basis and seeing, how do they answer the call? Do they honor a return or a refund or something like that? These are things that I think every business owner at every stage can and should be doing, is just experiencing their own product or experiencing their own sales or support. It doesn't necessarily have to be like secret shopping or anything like that, but if you are a SaaS company, sign up for your own product, see what the onboarding process looks like, because it will always be a really painful experience. You'll always find holes, the kind of flaws that I think you can only see when you're a founder, of like, why is our website saying that? Or why does this message appear? It doesn't make sense. Just doing this on a regular basis, you will always find things to improve. And those things are really needle moving, because if you're seeing them, then customers are probably experiencing them on the other end. The most powerful branding is what comes after somebody buys your product or service. It's the support you get, it's the service you get, it's how you feel after every interaction. So that's why companies should really be investing in their customer success team, in training, supporting, not something that you outsource, right? Like, so everybody's talking about AI support, and it's one of those things where this is where you can make a really big difference if you're a smaller business, because a lot of times larger companies, they outsource their support either overseas or they automate it, and it never feels personal. It never feels intentional. And this is where you can have a big leg up over a big company, is by having the more personal type of customer support relationship. Hope you enjoyed watching this video. I share advice just like this in my newsletter inside Proposify. You can get it by clicking the link down below.